Hello, Jakeb here, AuthenticGayBlog. So, in the UK, February is LGBT History Month, and I know in America, February is Black History Month, and October is LGBT History Month, and in the UK, October is Black History Month. It'd be good, really, if we sorted it out and we both celebrated Black History Month and LGBT History Month in the same month. So anyway, February in the UK is LGBT History Month, and this year is the 16th one. It was started by the lovely Sue Saunders, who I've met on a number of occasions, and she set up an organisation called Schools Out in response to, well, partly in response to Section 28 and her experiences as a gay teacher working in schools. I believe she was working in schools from the 1970s onwards. So she set up an organisation called Schools Out to call for better representation of LGBT people in the education system, to support gay teachers, support gay pupils, to ensure that there was some kind of education taking place around LGBT issues. So she came up with the idea of LGBT History Month, which has been celebrated since 2005. And it is very important. People might ask, well, you know, LGBT people in the UK at least have full equality now, and there is greater acceptance, but there's not really. There's still a lot of homophobia. There's still a lot of homophobia in schools. There's still a lot of issues. In fact, last year, when the government looked at the education of primary school children and introduced LGBT education to primary school children, and when we're talking about LGBT education, we're talking about reading storybooks with LGBT characters in them to ensure that the young children understand that LGBT people exist in the world. You know, so one book was called King and King, and that was about a prince, and his stepmom was urging him to marry, so she invites all these princesses to the palace, and he ends up falling in love with one of the princess's brothers and marries him. That is the book. So it just basically gently introduces children of that age to the concept of a diverse society. There's also books about disabled people, from different religions, ethnicities, etc., etc., etc. You get a picture, okay? So it's important that we have History Month. Now, I've done a review of a series called It's a Sin, which is set in the 1980s. So there was vehement homophobia in the 1980s. I mean, we're talking about hardcore homophobia on steroids, newspaper headlines, homophobia in the media, in the education, in society. 66% of the British public thought it was mostly wrong to be lesbian and gay in that time period. And obviously, mostly wrong means wrong another category. So it means that predominantly a vast majority of people, probably 80% thought that being gay was wrong. Okay? So it's important because of that, because we can not forget what happened in those time periods. You know, I came out in 91 and it was still pretty bad then. So we need to remember where we came from. We need to ensure that LGBT people get representation in history. I recall when I was doing stuff for LGBTV, we talked to some young boys in Manchester, and they knew who Alan Turning was. Sorry, I get memory lapses. They knew who Alan Turing was. They knew what he had done for society. They didn't know that he was gay and what had happened to him. And when we told him, then they were like, "Oh my God, that's disgusting. I can't believe that happened to him. That's terrible." So these were young lads who were about 12 or 13 years old. So it's important that we remember people who made massive contributions to society in whatever field: education, history, science, health, politics, whatever it was. That the lesbian and gay people that were involved are remembered and thought of as part of history. We also need to remember our history as well, where we have come from. Things like the Stonewall riots, the miners' strike, how we helped there, where that made sure that we got LGBT equality, because if we'd not supported the miners, they would not have voted at the Labour Party conference in 1986 for LGBT equality to be on the Labour Party manifesto, so obviously it wasn't until 1997 that Labour were re-elected and it happened. But it's important that we remember our history. It's important that we celebrate our history. It's important that we talk about our history. It's important that heterosexuals are educated about our history, and like I said in my video about It's a Sin, I felt very angry about what had happened to us in the 1980s. It was shit when I came out in 1991. It was even worse. And I felt very angry about the way we were treated. And I really felt that actually, we never ever got an apology. We never ever actually got any kind of acknowledgement about that, and if you've not watched It's a Sin on Channel 4, I recommend that you do. But at the end of it, one of the main characters talking to the mother of one of the lads that died says it was shame that killed your son. It was homophobia that killed your son. It was society's homophobia. It was your homophobia. It was shame that killed your son. So it was responsible for the deaths of many of my gay and bisexual brothers. As a cause of immense distress for my community, hardcore distress, and I would probably say, PTSD as well in terms of our experiences. So it's really important that LGBT History Month is celebrated and promoted. Thank you.